Okay, as I have discussed in my previous session, the asexual reproduction in plants, and in that session we have discussed one type of asexual reproduction, that is vegetative propagation. But there are four types of asexual reproduction in plants. Those are, first one is vegetative propagation, as you know, then is budding, then fragmentation, and last one is spore formation. So as I have discussed the vegetative propagation in my previous session, today we will discuss the rest of the three, and those are budding, fragmentation and spore formation. So let's start with budding. You can see the diagram. This is actually yeast. Yeast has some bulb-like projection. Yeast always has some bulb-like projection coming out from the yeast cell. This portion is called bud. This portion is called bud. And the small bulb-like projection coming out from the yeast cell is called a bud. The bud generally grows and gets detached from the parent cell and produces more yeast cells. So as you can see in diagram, this is the bulb-like projection. Now it is actually detaching itself through steps from the main yeast cell. In this diagram it has already been detached and it forms some new yeast cells from the parent cell. This is the parent cell and these are the new yeast cells from that bulb-like projection. The new one grows, mature and produces more yeast cell. If I rub this portion, first of all from parent cell, one bulb-like projection was there. So one new individual has been produced. Now from this new individual also, in the same way, another new individual can be produced. And from this new individual also another new individual can be produced. So in this way the yeast chain can be formed from that bulb-like projection, and this bulb-like projection is called budding. So through this bud, yeast can produce so many other yeasts. That is why this process is called budding. So again I am revising, yeast are having some bulb-like projection and these are called bulb. After some days this bulb-like projection detached from the parent yeast. As you can see, it is detached from the parent yeast and it is a new individual. From this new individual also other new individual can be produced, and in this way a long yeast chain can be formed, and as it is formed through budding, that is why this asexual reproduction is called budding, through budding. Next one is fragmentation. So the example of budding is yeast cell, okay, and next one is fragmentation. Fragment means small pieces. Whenever you are learning in English, fragment means small pieces. So easily you can understand that in fragmentation it will be divided into small pieces. You often see some slimy greeny patches in ponds or in stagnant water. These greeny patches are nothing but it is called algae. So such an example of algae is Spirogyra. Example of Spirogyra is one algae, and you can see the reproduction through fragmentation in Spirogyra. This is the parent Spirogyra, and when water and nutrients are available, algae grow and multiply rapidly by this process, by this fragmentation. Multiply rapidly. It just break up into two or more fragments. You can see that this is a parent algae and it is broken up into two sibling algae, and this is offspring algae, and not only two, but it can be divided into more fragments. These species grow into new individual. This is a new individual, this is also a new individual. So in Spirogyra, the algae named Spirogyra reproduce through fragmentation. Fragmentation means cut into pieces. So you can see here that from parent algae it breaks up into two or more individual, same individual, and then those individual grow into new individual. So this is the example of fragmentation, another asexual reproduction. As I have told you in my previous session, I have discussed about vegetative propagation, number one, asexual reproduction in plant. Second one is budding, that is budding in yeast. Third one I have just discussed, that is fragmentation in algae, example is Spirogyra. Last but not the least is spore formation. What is spore formation? In rainy season you can see that if you keep bread in moist place, there are some green outgrowths, and these are actually fungi on bread. And if you can see nicely, you can see that very attentively, that you can see that some spores are present there. Spores means small parts, small point like parts. So when spores are released, they keep floating. Now what actually happens when the bread is kept in a moist condition? Fungi can grow in that moist part, and the portion look like this. This is a branch like structure, that is called hyphae, and the head portion is known as sporangium. Inside this sporangium there are multiple of spores. There are spores like this. When it is already ripe or already matured, when sporangium is already matured, it just breaks and the spores are coming out from that sporangium. So when spores are released from sporangium, again I am discussing, if you are keeping bread in moist condition, you can see some outgrowth, some growth on it, and if you can observe attentively, there are some branch like structure. These branches are like this. One branch that is called hyphae, and on the head portion, at the head portion there is sporangium. What is sporangium? Within this head portion, inside that multiple of spores are there. When it is matured, the sporangium, when it is matured, it releases the spores. It releases the spores, multiple of spores, and when spores are released, they keep floating in the air. These spores are they keep floating in the air as they are light, and they can cover long distances. They are very light, so they can cover long distances, and these are asexual reproductive bodies. These spores are actually asexual reproductive bodies. Each are covered with hard protective coat. Each spores are covered with hard protective coat. Why? Just to protect the spores from the outer atmosphere, sometimes excessive heat, sometimes low humidity. They have to face this odd situation. That is why it is covered by hard protective layer, and under favorable condition, these spores germinate and develop new one. When these spores come into the contact with that moist bread, it germinate from that bread. It germinate from that bread. Again it forms one hyphae, one sporangium, and inside that sporangium there are multiple of spores. Then when it is matured, it just breaks down and release the spores, and these spores are very light. They can keep floating and can cover long distances because they are very light, but they are having protective layer. When it can get the favorable condition like moist bread, it can land on moist bread, and then again it can reproduce a new organism, and in that new organism again there is sporangium, there are spores, and in that way they reproduce. So these are the three more asexual reproduction. First one we have discussed in my last session, that is vegetative propagation. Second I have discussed budding of yeast. Okay. Third one is fragmentation, just cut into two or more pieces, that is Spirogyra, the algae. And last one is spore formation. You can find it in moss, fern. They reproduce in this way, the way of spore formation. As I have told you that sporangium, spores, these are very important points. And budding of yeast, I have already told you, bulb-like projection, and it is cut off from the detached from the parent cell and can grow into new individual. From that new individual also you can have the new bulb-like projection and you can have the new individual. In that way, chain of yeast can be produced. So budding, fragmentation and spore formation, these are the more three asexual reproduction in plants. So here we have covered the full asexual reproduction in plants. First one is vegetative propagation, second is budding, third is fragmentation, and fourth is spore formation. So now we will move on to the sexual reproduction in plants, and I will discuss it in my next session in fresh session, so that you can understand the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction in plants. Till then, goodbye. Thank you.